Hallo und willkommen zurück zu Episode 2 von Umineko, Turn of the Golden Witch. It did take a bit longer than I expected. I thought it would be like a week or so before I could upload this, but it's still way faster than it will probably be in the future, since I'm currently doing my bachelor's thesis and thus I will be quite busy in the next few weeks. So I picked probably the worst possible moment to start all of this, but I'm now into it and I just wanted to do it, and it's a bit of nice something to do on the sideline to not always be sunken into your studies, you know? It's just fun to be able to do something different. But putting that aside, let's get back into Umineko. Last time I expected that with the next episode coming out, even though Beatrice already told us, well, things are now going to get harder. It's not. The first one was easy mode. I thought, well, how hard can it get? I mean, the more we know, the better it will be, right? And the more we know about the people, the easier it will be to say who is innocent, and thus we can conclude who is the killer. And what I got instead was... what in the world is happening? I mean, I was quite okay with Beatrice suddenly appearing in human form. Like, okay, that's strange. That puts things in a different position, but it's manageable. But then we have demons with ox heads and stakes that turn into sexy ladies. And of course, there's Burn Castle and Delta Lambda. No, Lambda Delta, whatever. You know, the two girls who are totally not from Higurashi. And there was tons of weird magic stuff and reanimated corpses, and nothing made sense. So somehow episode 2 made everything just worse. It is quite fantastic, I have to say. I'm really along the ride with Battler. I was like, okay, there's no way there's magic. And after the episode, I was like, you know, technically I know there can't be magic, but how else is any of this possible? And thinking about that, how are we going to deal with the magic? Is it just an hallucination, or are we assuming that we are showing two sides of the stories? One where we assume magic is real and thus we see all the magic-y events, and then another side where magic isn't real and we are going to explain what happens there, and everything we saw in the magic version didn't actually happen and was just an alternative. And yeah, it makes things confusing. So, where do we stand on magic? Well, we have to be strict. If magic is real, if these scenes contain actual magic, then they would have to be discarded. Thus, they would be useless. So, can we actually discard these scenes as magic scenes and thus scenes that won't affect us, since they are not real, they don't exist, they're just weird? No. And that problem comes along with the third murder of Nanjo and Kumasawa, when multiple servants see the dead corpse of Kanon running around and dispersing into a bunch of butterflies. That just simply can't be explained with this is just a magic version, because they later then go to Battler, who is in the normal version, so to speak, and tell him about these events. So, well, not quite tell him. I think they only tell George later, right? So we can't completely discard it, but it would be weird to completely ignore these scenes. So we have to find a different interpretation for it. Thus, if it is real, I can only think of hallucinations. I mean, we are in the year 1986. We are not at the point where holograms and all of that would be this good. So it has to be some sort of hallucination. Furthermore, how does this explain the new Beatrice variant? Because the magic and Beatrice are pretty much interlinked. We assume that Beatrice is a witch and thus she is magical, but now we have an actual human Beatrice here. Well, we have these two variants. We have the normal one and the witchy one in the dress. And my assumption is as follows. The first one, the one in the dress, is actually human. She exists. She is there on this island and is a person that is involved in the story. The one in the dress, on the other hand, is the magical, mystical witch that doesn't actually exist. Now, do we have any evidence to back it up? Not quite, but there's one scene that I found very interesting, and that is the murder of Jessica and Kanon. Before the murder, Kanon meets Beatrice in the floor. On the floor? Whatever. And there Beatrice is wearing her normal clothes. And while things are still a bit magical, I think, with the appearing, disappearing stuff, but that can probably be explained somehow through magic effects or whatever. Like a magic trick, you know? Like people can disappear from a stage, whatever. So we assume that this is the real one. And then he goes into the room after she warns him of what might happen. And there he finds not only Jessica, but also the magical Beatrice. Now Beatrice is wearing her dress. Why? If she was wearing her normal clothes before, then why is she wearing her dress seconds later? Did you just change attires for some reason? Well, my assumption is that since this is a magic version, Kanon got into the room, somehow got a hallucinogen somehow into his body, and then started hallucinating. And as soon as we are in the hallucination, the magic world, Beatrice appears in her witch form and not in her normal form. So the person we saw in the room isn't actually Beatrice, but, well, it might actually be Beatrice, but in a different form, but it is the magical version that just might exist, or someone pretends to exist. The same will then obviously go for all the weird demons and sword fights. I was putting the swords at the beginning at, well, Kanon doesn't have a magical plate, but maybe he has a knife in his hand. But then later Shannon is using a barrier, but who knows, maybe they're just high as fuck. That's pretty much the best explanation I have at the moment. That we are pretty much doing Professor Layton. Wait, no. I won't spoil any plots from different games. If you know, you know. Layton games can get very weird with these things. So, let's get things started, because we'll try to look at things with as little magic as possible. And the first weird event, before any of the murders can even take place, is obviously Beato's letter. Last time we were quite unsure how Maria got it, because it was delivered by a supposed Beatrice that no one saw. This time though, Beato is definitely real. She appears there, she is seen by multiple people, she gives them the letters. This Beatrice is real. Now, she did the cute little magic trick for, well, not technically for Maria, because she didn't see it, but more for Rosa. But as Battler said, that could just be a parlor trick. Furthermore, the Shen gave these two letters to Rosa and Maria, which will be very important in the upcoming murders, especially the one for Rosa, since the one for Maria, since for the one with Rosa, we still have no idea what actually is the purpose behind that letter. Furthermore, even besides that, why is she here, and was she always here? If we assume that she is now here, and she isn't magical, she is a real person, then we have to question, was she actually here in episode 1, but we didn't know? Or is this actually a parallel timeline, where things don't just happen differently, but we have different people here as well? We have Maria's testimony that she has seen Beatrice here multiple times throughout the years, which in my opinion would tend toward the all timelines have the same basis idea, because Maria also thought she met Beatrice in episode 1, I believe. So we have to assume that in episode 1 Beatrice probably was on the island as well, which creates the next problem of person 19 being real, which then again means that everything in episode 1 could have been Beatrice, but it would be completely against the point of the story, so it's very hard to judge right now. We just need more backstory. Like, we have a lot of teasers towards that. I think, what was his name again? Kinzo told Shannon and Genji about his backstory, but we didn't get to hear any of that, so I really hope episode 3 or 4 deliver on that, so that we might make some assumptions based on the backstory. Like, we don't need to know everything, but just that we can even form theories about it. Besides Maria, though, we also have the evidence of Shannon and Kanon seeing her, and Shannon even being tasked by her to destroy the mirror in exchange for making George fall in love with her, which just seems to be the cheapest magic trick so far. To be quite mean, because all these love tricks are pretty much just confirming relationships or crushes that already existed. So she didn't really have to do anything besides saying, well, now it will be real because I will support you as a magical witch, and that then will create a placebo effect in Shannon and Kanon that will lead to them being more forward in their love affairs. So that's all no magic. And as I said, disappearing tricks, easy enough for a magician. So the question is, why does she do this? Well, maybe she actually is quite nice and likes to hide it under evil attire. And why she did destroy the magical mirror? Because, well, magic ceremony stuff. I guess she probably believes in it, or at least wants to make it seem like that. Maria, Shannon, and Kanon aside, though, it is quite interesting that this Beatrice seemingly never was in contact with Kinzo, because he clearly doesn't know she is here, and when he meets her later, he clearly believes that she is Beatrice. 1 second, I'm gonna take a little drink. I noticed during the last one that I got a bit dry while talking all the time. Since Kinzo recognized her as Beatrice, this means that she, at least to him, appears as such. And this means that she can't have met him throughout all the years at all. How did that happen? Both of them seemingly lived on the same island the entire time. Well, this could maybe go into the whole Golden Land theory. Like, maybe the Golden Land is actually Beatrice's hideout that is somewhere on the island. Once again, a very Professor Layton thing. And that's what we actually need to find, like a secret hideout on the island where all the gold is stashed. We'll come back on that later. All we need to confirm for now is Beatrice is real, and we have to take her in all of our calculations from now on. Thus, the suspect list is enlarged with Beatrice. Though I still think it would be weird for her to just be the killer, because, well, what's the joke? Oh, it isn't magical Beatrice, it's just normal Beatrice that's murdering everyone. Yay. How great. So, talking about murdering everyone, let's murder people. The Chapel Massacre at 12 p.m. Well, 12 p.m. is just a rough estimate. It might have happened earlier or later. But what we do know is that everyone who was murdered was at the chapel at 10 p.m. for a meeting. This meeting also included Beatrice and Rosa. All of the siblings, Rosa included, surrendered to Beatrice and said that they can't deny her anymore. This could obviously, what we are made to believe to think, mean that they all surrendered to the witch. They believed that the witch is real. We even have Rudolph saying, well, the devil's been proven, and Curie saying, oh, you are a witch. But I don't buy it. The devil's proof could just be that she is Kinzo's child. It was another thing referred to as a devil's proof earlier on, and Curie calling her a witch could just be an insult, so Beatrice wouldn't take it as such, or, you know, that's calling her a witch doesn't mean that she is an actual magical witch. What is weird about all of this, though, is Rosa is present throughout all of this. And this throws up multiple questions. First off, to start with the obvious one, why doesn't she mention it? Like, ever? The entire time throughout episode 2, this meeting isn't mentioned at all. The only little clue we have is during the tea time when Beatrice said that Rosa held up her end of the contract. But what contract? Well, we don't know, so that might be what actually happened here. She made a contract with Rosa and then they just murdered everyone in the chapel. For what reason, how that worked, who knows. Furthermore, what about the letter, Rosa? We know she has another letter and that she was to read it to everyone when they are together, and she didn't do so during the meal, so I assume she did so during the time at the chapel. It could obviously be that the letter that Rosa got was the one we later found in the chapel that was on the table, which read the whole I, Beatrice, will now collect my interest and such stuff. But it might also be something entirely different that's related to Beatrice being proven to all of them, so that they surrendered. But we can't confirm the content of the letter, so we can't speculate about it. Only weird thing to notice here, Beatrice is definitely involved and Rosa is hiding a lot of stuff. Oh, quick side note, during the morning when Rosa awakened, she was completely unaware of any of these events. Like, even in her inner monologue. How? Maybe she roofied herself or magically got her memories taken away, something like that. I don't know. Moving on, because shortly after we discovered the bodies at, what was it, 6:30 in the morning or something, Jessica stopped into the house to meet Beatrice, didn't meet her, they go to her room and... Oh, wait. I went on too fast. We got further information on the chat room. I forgot because these things happen at the same time. We get the introduction of the so-called red text. Well, I was talking about how I wanted more information because it would make things more clear, but that was clearly a mistake because now I have too much information and the information is actually destroying my mind. Well, all this info we got is supposed to be true, definitely true, and we have to assume it is because otherwise nothing of it makes sense. So let's take the word of the magical witch for all of this. What happened in the chapel, or what could have happened? Well, we first of all know that the chapel is only accessible through the door, so no secret exits or entrances, and we can't use the windows. Furthermore, the door only opens through keys, so we can't break it open or use any other means. There's only one key, and that key was in the letter Maria received early on from Beatrice, and that Rosa in the morning retrieved from Maria's bag. Then we also know that the letter that you got at 6 p.m. was the same one, so it wasn't necessarily switched or anything. This doesn't confirm that the letter wasn't opened and the key was taken out and put in again. And this was also then confirmed by Beatrice's refusal to repeat the information. The letter wasn't under constant surveillance and it could have been taken any time. Thus, any of the people here could be responsible as long as they take the letter out of Maria's handbag. This creates more questions though, because first of all, why goes through all of this? Well, it would make it appear like magic, I guess. And secondly, how did the culprit know that the key was inside Maria's letter? The only people who could have known are either Rosa or Beatrice, who then could have told the culprit. So one of these definitely needs to be involved with the culprit. There is simply no other way. For example, Genji just couldn't have known that the key for the chapel would be inside Maria's bag without either, well, Maria technically as well, but she wouldn't, without either Rosa or Beatrice telling her. Then, at the chapel we also found 3 gold bars. These must be from Beato, because if they aren't, then that means one of the siblings, or even multiple of them, found proof of the gold. It could just be that there were multiple in circulations, but it seemed more likely that Beatrice has them because the siblings seemed unaware if the gold was real or not. It was a big deal that Kraus knew about it. This could then be connected to the siblings' surrender because the gold, if I remember, was another one of these devil's proofs, or at least how the gold came to be. And this may be the reason they surrendered. Well, because would they actually just accept Beatrice as the legitimate child of Kinzo and thus a true descendant? I don't think so. There must be more to that. And that more might be the gold. Now, truly moving on to Jessica and Carmen's murder. This happened at 6:40 a.m. while most people were still in the chapel. In the room, Jessica's room, we find Beatrice. Oh, I should have taken a different picture because it was the one in the dress inside the room. There were obviously Canon and Shannon, which were murdered in this whole weird demon battle scenario. And these 2 stakes were there, the stake of lust and the stake of wrath. We will remember that because the stakes and who they kill might actually be important later when we try to predict some things. As mentioned, most others were at the chapel, at least the other children, Rosa and Nanjo. Meanwhile, most of the servants were at an unknown location. Shannon and Genji were technically together, but they could just cover for each other, though I think it's quite unlikely because of Shannon's involvement. And Kinzo was supposedly in his study. Now that we have gotten our second closed room, we have to admit that this one might be a bit trickier because we haven't found an easy loophole this time. And once again, Beatrice offers us information. Well, at least can't be it. But these truths are once again just an enormous headache. Because, first of all, the master keys, which are needed to open the room, which can only be opened through the window and the door, are only held by the servants, and there are no more keys. Only the servants have these keys. This obviously solves my first issue with episode 1, that everyone can have a key for anything. This time they can't. There's only the master keys and Jessica's key, and all of these keys are either found with the servants or in Jessica's room. Thus, the only ones who could have been at least with the servants seem to be the servants. We also know, once again, the door and window were locked as always and can only be opened by the key or locked from the inside in case of the window. There is no trick that can close the door, similarly to the chapel, and same goes for the window. I don't think we talked about the window in this case, but later on. Also, and this might be the most important piece of information, Canon was killed in this room, meaning he died here. He's dead. In this room, Canon is dead. Thus, in any data cases which would ever happen later, it can't be canon because he is now dead. What is quite interesting though is Beatrice refuses to answer the last time it was locked was through the master key. This could just be her trolling us, but if this is actually quite important, then this could make a certain implication. Since we know the door was only able to be opened and locked through the master key, the room itself can't have been locked with the door. Thus, the culprit must have escaped through another means or locked the rooms through something else. And the only thing that can be opened and closed here, be it in or outside the room, is the window. So the window at least somehow needs to be involved. Aside from that, the culprit could somehow still be hiding in the floors or whatever, but we'll talk about that more later when we get even more truths. Now, this scene once again provides a lot of magic. We've seen the whole event play out and it seemed all magical. So, do we just ignore it? Well, no, as we said, we need to think it might be a hallucination or something like that. How could this hallucination come to be? How did they inhale the hallucinogen? In Jessica's case, it could be through the inhaler. We spent an exorbitant amount of time explaining that Jessica has asthma and needs this inhaler and where it is to be found and who administers this, and there needs to be some purpose to it. And, well, the hallucinogen could have been brought through that. But that then leads to the issue, what about Canon? He doesn't need the inhaler, and he, as far as I knew, didn't eat or drink anything. So was he just gassed? But if they just used a gas, then why even use the inhaler for Jessica? So it is just gas overall. Who knows? And, as I mentioned before earlier, there's this whole Beato-Beatrice thing. Beato is now the human Beatrice. Beato met him outside, and then we saw Beatrice inside the room. Why? Well, this locked room won't be the last. In fact, even the next one won't be. And that is the one of the Deadly Revenant at 1 p.m. Natsuhi, this time it was Rosa, took control of the group and told all the servants to go to a separate room, including Nanjo. So they had a quiet little talk, which was weird. Maybe she told him something important or something he should do. And after that, the servants were visited by none other than our beautiful little boy Canon, or at least his supposedly near-death body. And then he was brought in, treated, told everyone it's Rosa, but they soon realized something is up here, something is weird. So then Canon exposed that he is actually a demon possessing the dead body, did some gross things with the wound which made everyone weirded out, and murdered Nanjo and Kumasawa. That happens, you know, he slashed their throats. And after that, we had a little fight, and Canon exorcised him with a spider. Yes, everything perfectly normal, nothing magic about any of this. During all of this, our usual suspects were in the parlor, while Beatrice was unknown, and Kinder was supposedly in the study. For the room, we have the same truths as Jessica's room, so closed door, closed window, only openable through the master key, etc. This time though, we also confirmed, at least in Beatrice's words, that there was no human besides the group in the room when we entered. Because Battler had the nice theory, similar to me, that someone was maybe just hiding inside, that they used some secret storage. Because that isn't an entrance or exit, and thus wouldn't break the rule of no secret exit. Now, Beatrice has no human besides us in this group. which, well, in most cases would deny everything because they're only humans. But we have to remember that we have to think from the eyes of our opponent. And Beatrice does not think in the normal terms of what a human is. She would also call people a witch or a furniture, which for her at least would be different from a human. Thus, if someone who would be considered furniture or a witch by Beatrice's standard would be inside this room hiding, then that wouldn't count as a human. Now, who could that be? Technically any of the dead people? But we saw all of their faces, so they should actually be dead. But at this point, does it even matter? Anyone who's dead could actually be alive. I don't know any. Maybe it was Natsuhi herself, or Kraus, or Rudolf, or Ava. I don't know. My best idea would be that either one of the children or one of the people they married for some reason is actually furniture created by Kinzo and then smuggled into his family to serve him or something. I don't know. So maybe Natsuhi, for example, is actually a furniture, and that's her constant headaches because she isn't fully functioning. She's a defect model or something, and now she's hiding in the room. And since she is a furniture, she doesn't count as human, and Beatrice can tell us there is no human in this room. It's hard to tell. But there is an even bigger issue with the entire event, and it's glamorous right in the face. It is all once again a hallucination. We saw a dead person turn up and murder people and then have a freak out and was exorcised with a spider web and dispersed into butterflies. What? Is that even canon? Like, it can't be, right? Because canon can't move around. Well, first of all, if you say canon killed them, it can't be, because canon is already dead. Beatrice's red text confirmed that. It can't be canon. Thus, it would be someone dressing up as canon, and then the hallucinogen makes them all believe it is him because it's close enough or something. Then the person goes in, kills everyone, and then for some reason takes Nanjo's and Kumasawa's bodies away? Why did we remove them? The letter we find later tells us, well, it's because they're necessary for the ceremony. Which, as we would assume, is a thing from the epitaph, which would correlate to the stakes that need to pierce to gorge the head, chest, belly, knee, and leg, I believe. But when we find them later, what actually gorged were the knee and the leg of the last epitaphs, which is after the head, chest, and belly thing. But the people who were killed for these were killed later. So why was it necessary that Nanjo and Kumasawa were gorged at the end? Or even, they were killed beforehand, so why can they only be gorged then? If they were killed at the end, maybe there would be some reasoning for that, but they were clearly killed earlier. Thus, the only thing I can think of is that one of these two didn't actually die, and it was just made to look that way by using blood capsules or something, and since everyone in this room was high, they just didn't realize, and well, the only doctor was dead, so he can't really confirm it, and that's how it happened? Well, at this point things seem completely desperate and random, and it could be anyone, anyhow, but everyone who could be it is already dead, and why not just suspect the servants? But Battler refuses to do so, so if Battler says it won't be any of the servants, and the story actually tells us at the end, well, it's the servants, then that's completely against the point, right? It would feel wrong on a meta level, you know? It might make logical sense, but it just doesn't make sense for the story. But moving on, we continue our last resistance. After everyone accepted that they are dead, Shannon, George, Genji, and Goda set up the plan that they need to somehow dispel the magical demons, because they now believe magic is real, while Battler, Maria, and Rosa are hiding away in the parlor. Now, this leads to George, Goda, and Shannon going on an entire side quest where they once again see tons of magical stuff, and I guess an hallucination, I guess they forget, or I don't know at this point, you know, whatever. And they were killed by these demons inside Natsuhi's room. Beatrice or Berto was also there, or I think it was Beatrice in this case, like the magical witch version of her. And there were lots of demons, and then the stake girls murdered them somehow. Well, ignoring all the magic stuff, let's just say they were killed in this room by someone who poisoned them and then murdered them. Well, who could it that have been? We know it can't be the people in the parlor, since they are checking on each other, and that they can't be. Genji's obviously roaming around freely, and technically also Kinzo. And then we have all our dead people, which we assume are dead, but might not actually be dead, because somehow, who knows. Well, for the entire thing, we got once again truths. Same old, same old. Closed room, key works only for this room, it can't be a trick, blah blah blah. No other human in the room. Yeah, maybe there's gas in the chapel that makes them hallucinate, but then why put it there? How did that work? And then why not just everyone? And maybe that, but maybe let's focus on the stakes, okay? Like the stakes correspond to sins, and you know, gluttony is Goda, makes sense, I guess. He's a cook, and greed for Shannon because she wanted more than was her right as a servant, and George just put himself up as the head of the house and decided what he wants is what will go, and thus he's prideful, and he dies by the pride stake. Makes sense. Okay, yeah, now what do we do with that? Like, what's the usage? Like, okay, cool, that's the that's the logic behind it, and now? We now encountered tons of magical stuff, and we just give up. We go back into the parlor, at least Battler does with Rosa and Maria, and we find the letter that just suddenly appears, because why not, you know? The only one could technically put it there are Rosa, Maria, and Battler, since they're the only ones in the room as far as we believe. And yeah, it isn't Battler, we know that. Maybe Maria was given the order to do that, but she wasn't near the table as far as we know. And then there's Rosa, who's doing all kinds of weird stuff, so maybe it's her. But also we just introduced that there might be people hiding in the room that aren't considered humans, so maybe they just looked up from the board, put a letter on the table, and then got back. It's a letter that's useful. Well, it helps us once again to find the gold. Yay. Now, why do they tell us that? I don't know. The witch might just taunt us, but if it isn't a witch, why would the killer do it? Because if they want the gold, then why kill all the people who know what the gold is? And nothing just makes sense anymore. Well, afterwards we split up. Maria and Rosa go to the chapel to get the gold and get off the island, because Rosa has enough of this, and I understand her. I will go with you, Rosa. Let's get away from this hellish island. Meanwhile, Battler goes up to Kinzo, who is playing chess with Beato, this time definitely the human one, and Genji, and Beato explained how everything happened, which means Beato is fully aware of all the murders, which we already suspected, which means she at least to some degree has to be involved. Then Battler submits to her, and everything goes to shit. We have a giant witch banquet with demons, and everyone is eaten and ripped apart, and Rosa has a whole slaughter event, like she's suddenly the Doomslayer, and everything is mad. Like everyone is high. Let's just say everyone is on drugs and having the best time of their life being ripped apart by demons. Who knows? I want to take a drink now. It's all worthless. Let's do it like Battler and have some alcohol. Well, now that everything has devolved, well, now we even sound drunk. Now that everything has devolved into some kind of madness, let's pass on all of this once again. There's just too many closed rooms. The first one is kinda solvable. The other three are only solvable if we assume that it's servants, but we can't do that, so yeah. The first one is Jessica and Kanon, which gives us the Lust and Wrath stakes. The second one are Kumasawa and Nanjo, which gives us Envy and Sloth. And lastly, we have Pride, Greed, and Gluttony for George, Shannon, and Goda. All three closed rooms, all three pretty much the same rules. the only explanation I can think of, someone was hiding in that room that isn't considered human by Beatrice. We know that Burncastle told us that Beatrice made a mistake because she exposed her weakness, so to speak, and she did the same thing again and again because she believed to have already won and just played with us. So maybe that's it. Like, we just have to figure out that we have to think like Beatrice in order to solve these things in a normal way. Like, think magical to come to the normal conclusion, because if you think normal, we come to the magical one. Something like that. Well, anyways, it's too many closed rooms and we don't know what to do with them. We have no idea at this point. I have this one idea and that's it. I don't know how they would get away with the window, like close it from the outside, but we know that can't be possible because we are told in the parlor that the window can only be closed from the inside, and thus there is nothing else. Someone must be in the room. But there must be someone who is actually furniture or witch in that room. That's the only thing I can think of. So, have you considered using a master key? Well, we don't have that. We only have the servants that we can expect that. Then, just expect the servants, because there are surely no red herring. Okay, cool, moving on. The next big issue, the Rosa issue. When I started this episode and saw that there was a lot of focus on Rosa, I thought, great, she's my biggest suspect. Now, after this case, I will know her thoughts and maybe some of her backstory, and I won't suspect her any longer because now I understand her. Well, I don't. Why? Simple, she was at the chapel, but never mentions it. She submits to Berto, but denies her being a witch. She's seemingly unaware, with all of her inner monologues, of anything that happened. She immediately knew where to look for the key, which might just be intuition, but who knows. She seems to have a conflict with Beatrice at the end, but we don't know any of the contents. And she has a letter that we don't know what was inside. Like, everything just makes more question about her. It seems so obvious that she just murdered everyone and then erased her memories somehow, but she can't have killed any of the other people, so is she just working with an accomplice? Or what happened? But maybe she is the accomplice and helping somehow, but then why isn't she aware of anything, and why at the end is she also murdered by the horde of demons? Did just everything go wrong? And you know, what are these demons? But whatever. Well, we might have some clues. The deal itself might be for Maria's sake, maybe, because it seems to be the most important thing for her, even though she constantly doesn't realize it. So it might also just be for herself, probably. Then she must have her memories erased somehow, right? Otherwise she would have mentioned it. And at least in her inner monologues, so she was roofied maybe? But it also seems like a very convenient excuse. But if the inner monologue is wrong, then we can't trust anything. That means that every text that isn't red text could be a lie. Every inner monologue, everything we are told could just be false. And then at that point, doesn't everything fall apart? And the last part, which at least is the most important bit of characterization, besides her loving her daughter and having a bit of a psychotic episode every now and then, she hates her siblings. They were awful to her and she justifiably hates them. So at least she probably wouldn't mind them dying? Though I don't know if she would actually kill them herself. Okay, we've put these things behind us, but there's still another thing. Our suspects. We can cross out Battler, in my opinion, and Murray. Natsui also seems safe, and Jessica as well. Shannon and Kanon also seem completely fine. All of the dots away, I will still leave George, because while he is very unlikely, he at least has motive, and this might work somehow with him when he takes charge at the end. Maybe he just leads them into a whole theater act. I don't know. He could have something to do with it. He's very low on my suspicion list, but I don't want him denying yet. The parents are obviously the most suspicious, since all the servants are pretty much not cleared, but relatively clear because of Battler's account. I'm not quite sure how to see Nandro yet, if he is included in the idea of servants or he's being completely different, because he isn't a servant, but he's also part of the family. He's a very weird outside tangible that I just can't explain right now. Also, who of these people knew about the letter? We already established earlier that Berto and Rosa knew, but if any of the others have to do with it, they also need to know. So who would Beatrice or Rosa tell? Well, in Rosa's case, I don't think anyone. Thus, I think Beatrice must be the one who told them, and at this point she must have just told any of them. So Curie seems a bit unlikely, I think, because she's very far away from the rest of the family in a way. She seems a bit more disconnected. But that might just be a wrong intuition, I don't know. So, knowing all that, who do we suspect to what degree? The Unite category, as mentioned, is filled with these 6. They seem completely we completely trust them, at least it seems like it. Their inner monologue check out, though I don't know how far we can trust the inner monologue, and they constantly seem to go against Beatrice. Then the nice but category still harbors Ava and Hideyoshi. We simply got no new information on them, besides Ava being more of a monster than ever. Kraus, for the same reason, he was also killed immediately, so no new info. George went here from You Are Nice because he now has a clear motive with the conflict between Ava and George established, and he will probably go into You Are Nice after the next episode, but at the moment it's just... I don't want to completely rule him out yet. Then Goda managed to move from Doesn't Sit Right to Nice But. He was quite supportive this episode. His inner monologue, well, not inner monologue, but the way he behaved seemed to fit the situation. He was quite scared and he was one of the servants, and it all worked out quite nicely. So I think he might actually be safe. And at the first episode, I only suspected him so much because we just didn't know enough about him. He's just a coward that has a kind of brave side to him, and he can be nice. Doesn't Sit Right still features Rudolph and Curie because, well, same reason as the others, they were murdered immediately and we can't tell any more about them. Kinzo is also still here. We know he's somehow involved, but especially after he was murdered by the demons at the end, he just seems like he's in over his head. Like, this is all part of his plan, but all the things that happened aren't actually how he planned them to happen. That's at least my impression. But he didn't plan them at all and just hoped for things to work out. Genji moved out of I Don't Trust You because, for one, he's a servant, and I kind of don't want to distrust the servants anymore after what Butler said. And he just seems to be very loyal to Kinzo. Also, he seems way too convenient here. It's the whole thing of him being a weapon and a furniture and being able to fight demons, and it just doesn't fit right for me anymore. Also, in the first episode, he was clearly made a suspect by Natsuhi, and that's probably just too much of a red herring at this point. Then we have Kumasawa. She moved down from Nice But simply because of the whole canon action where Nanjo and her body disappeared. Otherwise, she's in the same position as Goda. I think they're kinda nice, and I don't have anything against them. It's just weird that her body disappeared. Now, for the I Don't Trust You. Rosa is still not here because she annoys me more than ever. I don't understand her. I have no idea what's going on with her. Nanjo moved down here because he isn't a servant, and thus would be excluded from Battler's rule. He also disappeared with Kumasawa's body. Furthermore, if we have hallucinogens, who would know more about this kind of stuff than a doctor? Lastly, we have Beato here. I didn't really want to put her here because it would be way too obvious if Beato is the killer. But it's also undeniable that she is involved with the murders because she knows about everything that happened and how everyone died, and it's impossible for her not to be involved. Okay, but with our suspects now as misarranged as ever, and I'm not seeing the green side getting much bigger soon anyways, let's try to figure this whole case out another way. Once again, let's go back to Beatrice's rule. In the first episode, I thought, well, maybe it's that everything has to follow the epitaph. And while this is still kind of true, the killing of Nanjo and Kumasawa seemed quite out of order, so maybe just misunderstands the epitaph, but that doesn't seem to fit anymore. What does still fit is that as long as the ninth twilight hasn't been reached, she needs some sort of ritual. This seems quite obvious with how everything goes down. And as long as something is observed, it exists, and if no one observes it, it ceases to exist. Once again, we have the whole Devil's Proofs idea this chapter, so it still checks out. But what we also have this chapter is that the idea that miracles can't be witnessed, this is completely thrown out the window. The whole thing with Kanon and his body that was revived from the dead, that is clearly witnessed by all of the servants and not all of them die. Thus, maybe it is simply that it can only happen in front of people who believe in it in the first place, but that also doesn't quite work because Maria was forbidden from witnessing it, even though she is clearly a believer, but that's the furthest I can stretch it with while still maintaining it as some kind of a rule. Furthermore, Beatrice seems to work through contracts. Every time she does something, like with Shannon and the Shannon affair, she offers people a contract, do something for me and I will do something for you. A whole devil act, you know? And the same thing goes for Kinzo. So maybe something like that happened. Then we have also the whole Rosa ordeal, where she mentioned the contract at the end. So this whole murder mystery could just be Beatrice making, or Berto, making a contract with the killer, telling them, murder everybody and I will give you the gold, and this is how it played out. Seems too easy, but the contract needs to be involved somehow. Now, we've moved out of the way the rules, what it could be, and who we suspect. Now, using all of that, let's try to predict the next 3 episodes. I did this last time. This was my episode 2 prediction. It was kinda alright. It hit really on point on some things, and others were completely wrong. The first Twilight was actually quite accurate, only that Rosa died instead of, well, not Rosa, Klaus died instead of Genji, who far surpassed my expectations. You could pretty much switch Goda, Genji, and Kraus around one time and you would have the correct order. I furthermore perfectly predicted the second Twilight and kind of also the whole relationship between Shannon and George would play a larger role this time around, though they didn't survive till the end, so it's only a semi-victory. Also, I thought that Rosa would somehow disappear on the way because she's the actual killer, but now she stayed around till the end and didn't do anything, or at least didn't seem like it, so I would kind of offer that as well. And then it's of course Kinzo, who actually made it through to the end, which really surprised me because I thought he would never do that, or at least not till the end, because it's kind of his dream, but now he did it. So I don't really know what to do with him now. For the 10th Twilight, I already talked about Shannon and Goda, but I'm quite happy that I predicted Battler and Maria correctly. Battler was quite obvious, but it really seems like Maria is the counterpart to Battler. It wasn't as apparent this episode, but in the character descriptions, when you switch to the magic characters descriptions, you can see that besides Kinzo, the only family members mentioned there are Battler and Maria, where Battler is the one who isn't good with magic at all, pretty much the anti-magic guy, and Maria has a high affinity for magic, making her the magical witch girl. So I would say they definitely are opposites, and I'll still keep with the idea that Maria will always survive to the end as the polar opposite of Battler. Now, before we go to episode 3 prediction, I had one little idea that will influence the prediction, because at this point things seem so random I didn't really know what to do with episode 3. The sins and their victims. We talked about the stakes multiple times. There were 4 who chose different victims this time, these being pride, gluttony, lust, and another one. I forgot the last one's name. I think it was greed. Yeah, greed, I think. While the same ones were chosen by envy, sloth, and wrath. On the double victim side, we have Genji and George for Pride. Lust has Ava and Jessica. Kinzo and Shannon for Greed. Hideyoshi and Goda for Gluttony. While the ones who were chosen a second time by each stake were Kumasawa for Envy, Nanjo for Sloth, and Kanon for Wrath. If we keep with that idea, I think that each stake will only ever pierce these characters. I don't think that George would ever be pierced by Sloth, because these stakes themselves are about the sins of the character, the biggest character flaw. And I don't think this will change dramatically unless everything about the situation changes. Thus, I will try to keep it in a way where the victims from the 2nd to 8th Twilight will always be 7 people who match the sins. So for example, Ava and Jessica can't both die during this time because both of them would be lust and thus they can't both be killed. Furthermore, we have, I believe, 5 more characters that haven't been assigned a sin yet. I will ignore Battler and Maria since I believe they will always survive to the end, so it would be pointless to assign one for them. As to who could fit what, I think Rudolph could fit with Lust as well. I hoped it would play out more nicely, but we have to assign 2 people to a sin a third time because otherwise the numbers don't work. I just don't know enough about Rudolph to put him anywhere else, and so far Lust seems to fit him. As for Envy, both Rosa and Natsui seem to fit that extremely well. Natsuhi is obviously jealous of everyone else who has the Golden Eagle and is acknowledged by everyone. And while Rosa kind of could also fit Wrath with her hatred for her siblings, she's also constantly imitating them, which is a very Envy-like thing. Kraus, on the other hand, always pulls out too early and never goes through with his ideas and dreams. And he just doesn't really do much at this point, so I think maybe Sloth fits him quite nicely, which just left Wrath to Courier, and the only reason is here because I once again didn't quite know where else to put her. I don't see her at Envy or Sloth or even Gluttony or Greed. Lust also seemed to fit Rudolph way better, and thus I thought between Pride and Wrath, and in case he wouldn't be Wrath, I would maybe put Natsuhi here or Rosa. But thinking about it, she seems like the person who would be the least likely to act out, and thus maybe she is the most fitting person to act out, you know. So I'm going with this constellation, and then I'll try to fit everyone to their respective sin in my prediction. Talking about the prediction, well, here it is. I removed the 9th Twilight since I already saw that Natsui dying the first run just wasn't really part of it, and it's just the extra of the 5 survivors, and she was the first one of them to be murdered. The other 4 were probably just murked by the demons afterward. Now, before we talk about the people themselves, there are 3 witch-shaped issues in this room. One being Beato, who actually appeared in human form. I won't put her here yet, because it seems like she's outside Twilight, at least she considers herself to be, as she talks about 18 people who will fall victim to the roulette. But it would be kind of funny if she actually were murdered during the first Twilight at one point. And while I wouldn't make this prediction for this episode, I kind of want to make it for the 4th one. It would be really funny. And then there's our 2 other witches, which don't have a human form yet, at least. I don't know if they might appear in human form later. This is a possibility if Beato could appear, but so far they're just outside everything, so who knows. Now, for the prediction itself. Who will die during the first Twilight? This is the first thought I had. Oh well, Maria and Butler obviously survive. At least that's my idea. Now, to know who dies during the first Twilight, we need to know who the next episode will be focusing. We saw during the first episode a great focus on Natsuhi, and during the second one a great focus on Rosa. This is interesting for two parts, because they are both parents, and Natsuhi isn't an Ushiromiya, at least not by blood, while Rosa is. This gives me the idea that every time we will be focusing on a different mother. With mothers being, I don't know, maybe somehow compared to demons or witches or whatever. I'm not quite sure yet where we're going with that, but maybe each time we have a different mother that will be the focus of each episode. Now, from the remaining ones, we have either Ava or Kyrie. Since the whole thing is question arc 4 episodes and answer arc 4 episodes, ending the 4th episode, which is the final of the question arc with Kyrie, seems the most fitting, because she's the most directly connected to Battler, because she's his stepmother, so to speak. Thus, I would go with Ava for the first Twilight. Now, for the 3rd episode. Now, if you want Ava to get focused, she obviously needs to have power to be the one controlling the situation. For that to happen, well, she would need to survive to the end, and Kraus needs to die, as well as Natsuhi. Because, well, Natsuhi already has focus, and I think both of them being dead just works out kind of nicely here. If Kraus dies, Ava is the next in line in the family, and thus she has the control. Who else would need to die? Now, this is more, he already has enough focus ideas, but I still kind of think Genji needs to die at some point. This episode focused on him a lot more, with him even surviving till the end, so getting him out this time seemed like a fitting idea. Now, the rest gets a bit more difficult. There could obviously be the idea with Hideyoshi, with killing him first to make Ava more unhinged, but also I kind of want to see more from their dynamics, so he also might survive longer. Thus, I'm not getting far here. So, let's try to focus on people related to her that might fit the second Twilight instead. Who could survive the first and then die on the second? Well, so far the second Twilight seems to specifically target people in love, which, from the remaining ones, would either be Shannon and George, Jessica and Kanon, well, or Rudolph and Kyrie. We already murdered Jessica and Kanon last time, so I don't think we need to repeat that. And George and Shannon also already died during the second Twilight. Also, George is Natsuhi's child, so he would probably have a lot more focus on the relationship with his mother during this episode. This only leaves us with Rudolph and Kyrie. Okay, now that these two are alive, what do we do with Rosa and the rest? We have 4 female characters left. Rosa, Kumasawa, Shannon, and Jessica. From all of these, Kumasawa seemed like the easiest one to kill during the first Twilight. At least putting Rosa up there again would feel kind of weird right now. So I would say Kumasawa over Rosa during the first Twilight. Which would then put Rosa here, since she's the only envy we have remaining. Natsuhi is already dead by our idea, and Kumasawa as well. Why Kumasawa exactly? Well, she had a bit of focus during this and last episode, and I just really don't know what to do with her right now. She died 2 times during the 2nd to 8th Twilight, so I don't want to put her here again. But she also doesn't seem like a survivor in something that's focused on Ava, so first Twilight it is, and thus Rosa follows here. Now this leaves us with 2 more female characters, one of which being Shannon, and the other being Jessica. Jessica can't die during the 2nd to 8th Twilight, because we already have Rudolph here, which would be last. Thus, he would need to survive till the end, or die in the first Twilight. And, well, this also means that Shannon would need to die during the first Twilight or survive till the end. Why? Well, because we need 3 female characters to die during the first Twilight to keep up the gender balance of 3 males and 3 females dead. Now, if this whole thing focuses on Ava and her relationship with George. The relationship between George and Shannon would be important. Thus, I would put more focus on Shannon during all of this than Jessica, which then in turn means Jessica needs to die early. This is kind of unexpected for me because I thought maybe the children would never die at first, but it also seemed quite fitting when I look at the groups that left at the beginning. We have Kraus, Natsuhi, Genji, Kumasawa, and now Jessica, which are all very related to the island itself. They've been here a lot of times. So maybe that's our new rule. Furthermore, with Rosa, Rudolph, and Ava being in the survivors, we have the alliance of siblings against Kraus now being the survivors for now. Also, with Kumasawa and Genji dead, we are slowly starting to put suspicion away from the servants. We had the servants all die at the beginning. Earlier, being suspected because of the killings in episode 2. So moving away to different suspects might be a good idea for episode 3 so that things don't become too repetitive. Now, corresponding to Sloth, we had now Nanjo, and corresponding to Pride was technically Genji, so since he is also dead, this only leaves George, which, how do we play this out? If we kill George during the Twilight in a Ava-focused episode, how do we do this? Well, maybe if we somehow play into the whole relationship between George and Shannon, and that Ava somehow needs to accept Shannon, and then Shannon would probably survive till the end, I guess. Because I can't see killing both Shannon and George as fitting. Maybe if you want to punish Ava somehow, but I don't know. It could be fitting, but having Shannon survive till the end for the first time would be kind of nice. She died during the first Twilight, episode 1, and during the second to 8th in episode 2, so now having her survive for once would be a nice change of pace. Along with that goes obviously Kinzo, because he's our second greed, and thus, since Shannon survives, he now needs to die during the 10th Twilight. This leaves us with 3 more characters, those being Kanon, Goda, and Hideyoshi. Well, we know what to do with Kanon, we already have Raph covered due to Kyrie, and I really like the idea of having the whole sibling focus with Kanon and Shannon. We had Kanon be the one to be killed first because of his hatred for Beatrice when Shannon was killed. We then had Jessica and Kanon both alive and having their whole relationship. And now maybe we could see Kanon being angry because Jessica was killed. And in the same way, Shannon being angry because George is dead. And then there's a whole sibling bond, and it would work out quite nicely. Also, Kanon would finally not be the dead person due to wrath. This now leaves both the Pillars of Gluttony, and we could kill Goda first or Hideyoshi. I really don't know which way to go here. I've put Hideyoshi as the first victim and Goda as the second to 8th Twilight victim here, as a Gluttony victim, because I kind of like the idea of Hideyoshi dying and Rosa now being more unhinged, but if I may be honest, maybe it is more likely for Goda to die first, because then we would actually kill the whole household, with Kinzo and Shannon and Kanon being put aside. Also a quick side note, because I remembered it while talking about it right now, but Kinzo mentioned how he didn't have any great expectations for Shannon at all, so her surviving now would kind of be really funny. So, this is my setup for episode 3. I'm feeling a lot more uncertain about this in episode 2, but the first Twilight cast seems quite fine for me. As I said, I think maybe switching in Goda for Hideyoshi might also work, but then I'm not quite sure how we play the whole Ava thing. Aside from that, the second Twilight, I'm feeling pretty good of that, and the survivors being Shannon and Kanon also feels quite nice. That aside, the 4th to 8th Twilight, I just can't see how it really works out. Maybe Nanjo and Goda would be killed first, then George, angered by everything and angry because Ava rejects Shannon, goes to confront Kinzo, and that leads to these two dying. But then what do we do with Rosa? I don't know. Especially because Maria and Rosa have this whole relationship going on, and how would that play out? Well, episode 3 will certainly throw me for a curveball once again. I'm curious if we just get, I don't know, the other witches now, or maybe things get even more magical, and we just have, who knows, a giant dragon descending upon the mansion. Yeah. For now, let's leave it at that and see how it plays out. I'm happy if you listened to me till here, and would be even more happy if you turn in next time as well, when we try to finally solve the mystery of Rokkenjima's mass murder. Have a nice day.